story. This one's in our world lead. The Trump administration today seizing 2 oil tankers. This is just 4 days after the U.S. Went into Venezuela and seized Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro and his wife, the First Lady. The goal, we're told, is to try and cut off most Venezuelan exports of crude oil. One of the vessels was seized in the Caribbean. This vehicle was considered to be stateless but conducting illicit activities, according to U.S. Southern Command. The other vessel, however, is a Russian-flagged tanker, and that was seized in the Atlantic. Attorney General Pam Bondi said it was identified for its role in a sanctions evasion network responsible for supporting foreign terrorist organizations. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt today said that President Trump is not afraid to keep seizing sanctioned oil tankers, despite concerns that this could ramp up, of course, tensions with both Russia and China.
He's going to enforce our policy that's best for the United States of America. And with respect to these ship seizures, that means enforcing the embargo against all dark fleet vessels that are illegally transporting oil.
The White House claims there is a significant private sector interest around Venezuela's oil industry, though other reports do suggest that some in the oil sector are quite skeptical. All of this is happening as the U.S. is working on a potential deal with Venezuela's interim government, a government that is now being led by Maduro's vice president, part of his regime that the U.S. says took power illegally and continually represses the Venezuelan people. There are reports that leadership in Venezuela is cracking down on Venezuelan citizens who publicly supported Maduro's ouster. Today, the White House says they're tracking those reports and oppose any sort of crackdown. I want to bring in the Secretary of Energy right now, Chris Wright. He joins us from Miami, where he just spoke with oil industry executives earlier today. He also founded the fracking company Liberty Energy and has an extensive background in energy, including nuclear, solar, oil, and gas. Secretary Wright, thanks for joining us. So the White House says oil executives are eager about the opportunities to invest in Venezuela. Many have not commented publicly. CNN is reporting that many industry insiders are feeling hesitant about doing business in Venezuela. Quote, "The appetite for jumping into Venezuela right now is pretty low. We have no idea what the government there will look like," one well-placed industry source told CNN Monday. "The president's desire is different than the industry's, and the White House would have known that if they had communicated with the industry prior to the operation on Saturday," unquote. Even back in November, we should note, the CEO of Exxon told Bloomberg that they'd have to see what the economics look like on Venezuela. But you just met with actual oil executives. What are they telling you? What are you hearing?
Oh, yeah. Look, they've seen Venezuela slide downhill for 25 years. Since Chavez came to power and continued with Maduro, collapsing oil production, rising criminality, just a destructive force in the Western Hemisphere. I would say they share my thrill for President Trump's bold and creative leadership to try something different. We haven't been able to fix the growing Venezuelan problem for over 2 decades. Now, a laser strike brings out the head of essentially a criminal organized gang that lost the last 2 elections. And now we've got leverage over and are constructively working with the interim authorities within Venezuela to try to move it into a better direction. It's less a threat to America, less a threat to the Western Hemisphere, less of a drug runner and kidnapper and all the things elaborated on in the 25-page open indictment. So I would say they are thrilled. This is bold leadership. All of us die seeing 8 million people flee Venezuela because the country has been collapsing. Yeah. Now we've got decisive leadership. And I would say the interest to go into Venezuela, investigate it, invest in Venezuela is absolutely tremendous. Of course, you're not going to put $10 billion in there without some security, but the interest to baby steps and eventually lean in big is tremendous.
Right, but you acknowledge in your speech today it's going to be a challenge to increase production investment in Venezuelan oil, and an analysis from Rystad Energy estimates it's going to take $183 billion and 15 years to scale back up production back to $3 million a day, 3 million barrels a day, where it was before the U.S. sanction regime started. How do you plan to convince these companies that this is going to be profitable for them with such daunting figures, 15 years and almost $200 billion?
Oh, they won't need convincing. I'm getting barraged with inbounds. We're interested. How can we get involved? Chevron's already there. Chevron's been there for over 100 years. Easy opportunity to grow Chevron's production and operations there. They're there today. So no, we won't be twisting or convincing anyone's arms. But of course, to make the very big long-term investments, we've got to get the government in a better place where they've got secure rule of law, national security, a government that represents the people of Venezuela. And that's a process. We're not going to get there overnight, but we now have the leverage and the engagement to actually get there. And there are short-term things, Jake, that can go in. A small amount of spare parts, a small amount of American technology, a little bit of help. Venezuelan production could be grown 20, 30, 40% in the next 6 to 12 months. If we had nice cooperation with Venezuela, the interest for the parties to go do it is strong and ready to go.
So if I were an oil executive, I would say to you, the Maduro regime minus Maduro is still running Venezuela. 6 people were indicted in that document you talked about. 4 of them are still in the country, running things. One of them running a criminal gang, one of them in the government, one of them Maduro's son, another one a former government official. So you talk about this, but like not only is Venezuela going to have to rebuild itself in 15 years, which puts us at the year 2041, asking these oil companies to make these investments while it's still a very unstable place, still being run by the Maduro regime, just minus Maduro.
Well, think of the leverage the United States has. All of their revenue from oil, which is the dominant way they fund the government, is controlled by the United States. We're going to sell that crude, we're going to put it in accounts, and we're going to distribute that funds to the interim authorities in Venezuela and align that with incentives to improve their behavior, end the criminality, reduce the risk to America and the risk to their own citizens, and work with us to construct more confidence in that. But of course, with time, you're going to have a different government that's going to be representative of the Venezuelan people. But you can't do that on day 1 or on day 10. We want to keep the country from collapsing, and we want to immediately stop its enormous damage to the United States, exporting gangs, drugs, money, bringing our adversaries into the Western Hemisphere, giving them bases of operations. There's a lot of improvement we can do right away. And I wouldn't read anything into a study that says some giant number spread over 15 years. That's not how the world works, and that's not how the energy industry works. It's incremental. But production could be growing relatively soon.
I understand that there
with
aren't
the
going
right cooperation with Venezuelan government.
I understand that there isn't going to be an election on day 1 or day 10, but I think a lot of people around the world, especially in Venezuela, are wondering when would an election be? It seems odd to a lot of observers that Maria Machado, who won the Nobel Peace Prize, leader of the opposition, her cut-in won the Venezuelan election in 2024 with 70% of the vote, that she has kind of been dismissed by President Trump. And Maduro's vice president is running things. When do you think elections will happen?
They will happen. Venezuela has a great history of democracy. It was a prosperous, stable, great American ally, great member of the Western Hemisphere. Our goal is to get back to those days. But that takes some time. You've got to deal with the people who have the guns today and who control the powers today. But we have leverage over them. That's the difference. We control the flow of funds into Venezuela. We can take the existing authorities that are running Venezuela and move them in a highly positive direction because we have tremendous leverage. But you're right. Ultimately, you want to lead to a representative government, to elections in Venezuela. That'll be, if we continue on this path, that'll be coming.
President Trump announced last night on Truth Social that Venezuela is turning over 30 to 50 million barrels of sanctioned oil to the United States to be sold at market price. And he said he is going to control that money. Top administration officials told lawmakers in a House briefing today that the U.S. is not using the Treasury Department to hold the money. Where is that money going to be held?
Well, we're still working out the logistics of that, and there's some legal things that are involved in that. But whichever account this ends out in, I'll know in 24 hours, is going to be controlled by the United States government. And so, yes, those funds, and look, this is a very open dialogue with the leaders of Venezuela. That crude that comes out of Venezuela will be marketed by the United States, collected those funds, and put into an account. And we will disperse those funds to the authorities in Venezuela on a relatively rapid time frame with the right cooperation. This actually could be a huge benefit for the people of Venezuela in the short run, in addition to in the long run. We want to bring them out of the rogue nation, disruptor, threat to America, and into responsible citizenship. But that's a pathway. That's a pathway.
Secretary of Energy Chris Wright, thank you so much. Appreciate your time, sir.
You bet, Jake. Thank you.